Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, some time ago, you may remember I read a letter from a lady who was very worried about the energy bill, which, by the way, I think since the King has done his proroguing business, it has now become law. It's passed the royal assent, and so this is a thing, or at least it will be, I guess, from the 7th of November when Parliament starts up again. So all very concerning that something that has just been thrown in with very little consultation and no public knowledge about it. Anyway, this letter that I read was in response to the energy bill being floated, and it came from Eileen O'Conner, who's the director of Radiation Research Trust. So not just some little old lady sitting in a backwater, but actually a charity, a trust rather, that has been looking at radiation and the problems of things like smart meters, which the energy bill is going to be saying that we're all pretty much mandatorily eventually going to have, and saying, well, actually there's a few problems with it, not least the surveillance, but also the radiation health issues. So I've asked Eileen to come on the show. Eileen, thank you so much for joining me, and well done you for getting in touch. And I know you've had a response to the letter that you sent in to government, presumably.
Yes.
Well, let's just roll back for those people who didn't see that episode or can't remember what it was about. Could you, first of all, just tell us what your letter and the complaint that you had was to government about this energy bill?
Well, firstly, thank you, Richard, for the invitation to join you on the show, and for promoting the letter, because I think it's been used by a lot of people now. We've been inundated at the Radiation Research Trust with people asking for copies of the letter to send to their MPs. So hopefully, it will start to wake up a number of MPs to the seriousness of this issue. I was concerned because I've been involved with this charity now for over 20 years, and I'm fully aware of the health issues that are associated with this technology. And it is serious. It really is serious. We can't continue without addressing those issues, and especially for people who are suffering with electrosensitivity, who are completely isolated and relying on traditional meters in the homes rather than living under the threat of a smart meter radiating radiation all day within the home, and there's no escape. So it was brought to my attention that the energy bill was coming forward, and concerns were being raised that it would give the industry the right to maybe break into people's homes, to force a smart meter into people's homes. And people were contacting us who were absolutely terrified. And this was really a cause for concern, because there has been issues raised where the energy providers have actually broken into people's homes and forcefully installed smart meters. This has been recorded within the Guardian and other major newspapers, and also spoken about in Parliament. I think Parliament mentioned over 90,000 people who got into energy deficit with the bills, and because of that, magistrates were giving out a ruling to allow the forced entry into people's homes. And there's been reprimands because of vulnerable people, who've been put at risk, elderly people with young children, and they're being forced to take a smart meter as a pay-as-you-go meter. So it's already happened, so there is real fear that they may force these meters within people's homes, and that's not acceptable. So I took it upon myself to write a letter to the government and draw their attention to this issue once again, because we've actually delivered quite a detailed report to the government, actually directly to Number 10 many years ago, and with the help and support from our MP and another local MP. And that report has obviously fell on deaf ears, and it could have saved a lot of heartache and a lot of mistakes that we fully believe will happen, and cost, which is already happening because lots of the smart meters are working on 2G and 3G, which is going to become obsolete. So they're going to need to replace smart meters with more smart meters, and it's just a costly exercise. It's replacing the traditional meters that are working fine and should remain, or we should have a fiber optic network which is safer and secure. So apart from the health issues, we're also concerned about the cyber attack issues as well. Cyber
Yeah.
security.
Just for this, I mean, we've spoken on the channel before about the problem with electromagnetic frequencies and the electromagnetic fields and how people are affected by it. But just for for those that may not have heard that, the problem with a smart meter, as you say, is it's like a little router, but it's radiating so that this signal presumably it's telling the router in your house, it's communicating with your router within your own house, the information that it's watching, i.e. all your electric usage, and then through your internet connection sending that to the utilities provider. And
Yes.
so you're in yet another field of radiation. I mean, you've already got your router, which presumably you have to have a Wi-Fi router. Then this thing by default is a Wi-Fi because it's not hardwired, which might be a bit easier if it was hardwired because you'd stop the radiation, presumably.
Absolutely. I mean, with your own router, if you have a Wi-Fi router, you can switch it off.
Yes.
Or you can use a hardwired system, which I use myself, which is safer and faster. But with the smart meter, you've got no control over it. It's going to be giving out radiation all day, and the sharp pulses of radiation, which scientists have raised concerns about, and then communicating with all the smart technology which the government are promoting, to go into people's homes. So the house was, our home's going to be alive with radiation the way it's going, and there's what people who are suffering with electrosensitivity, and I think that many people are going to be misdiagnosed at the moment and not realizing what the cause is of many illnesses, and it's false economy in the long run.
Yeah.
It really is. It will have to all be removed and replaced with fiber optic, or back to the traditional meters. So it's going to be a massive, costly exercise for us, and not only cost, but the cost to our health, and that's
Yes.
so important, and especially for our children and the elderly. And I raised in concerns in my letter about the concerns for children who are known to be more vulnerable to this type of radiation, and they're going to have a lifetime of exposure to it. They'll take a deeper penetration of radiation into their bodies, into their brains. And then for the elderly, the elderly in the care homes, in the care homes, what if the elderly are next to where they've got a whole bank of the smart meters?
Yeah.
It's people who are living in flats where they're living above, where they've got the whole garage full of meters that are servicing the whole block of flats. Who's checking the radiation levels? Nobody. There's no
No.
regulation. There's also concerns that they're fire hazards. Same
Ah,
with the
right.
foam masts as fire hazards. There's a report only just been released by Robert Kennedy's main lawyer, Scott McCulloch, just only released within the last few days, about concerns of fire hazards for 5G. So this is, and they've raised concerns that there has already been massive electrical fires with the foam masts in the USA. And I know we've had the same in the UK with electrical faults with the foam masts. And it's actually resulted in billions of pounds worth of damage in the USA, with hundreds of homes that were burnt down. I think it was in Malibu. You can look up the report. And so they're actually demanding now that there are fire safety certificates that are in place, and fire safety hazards that are actually adhered to. But I don't think that that's happening. I don't think the councils are actually even looking at whether the structure is safe, whether they're fire safe, and now
Yes.
they're putting these meters into people's homes. I've actually helped a family earlier this year who contacted our charity. They were absolutely desperate. Their traditional meter had stopped working, and the industry, EDF Energy, were demanding that they could gain access into the home and force a smart meter upon them. And this poor family, it was an elderly couple, and their daughter suffered with ill health, and they were pleading for their health, pleading with them, offering to pay to have a traditional meter replaced, which that you shouldn't have to pay for that. It's a service they're providing.
Mm.
And so they contacted us because they even went to the ombudsman, and the ombudsman actually said on the telephone to them that they could gain access into the home and force the smart meter on them. So I actually then took it upon the Radiation Research Trust. We actually got in touch with EDF Energy and with the Ombudsman to let the Ombudsman know they've made the wrong decision. There was a right to opt out, and it's clear in the government literature that there is a right to opt out. And I encouraged this family to contact their MP as well. They were reluctant to contact their MP because I think people have given up on MPs now, and they
Mm.
just think they're not going to help, they're not interested, and I encouraged them to still contact their MP. That's what they're paid for. They're paid to look after our best interests, and so they did. They got in touch with their MP and sent them a copy of my letter, which was similar to the letter that you've read. And the MP went to the House of Commons library and was shocked when he discovered that, yes, you have a right to opt out. It's not mandatory to have a smart meter. And then he wrote a letter to the industry saying, why can't you supply them with a smart meter, with a traditional meter? And thankfully that issue was resolved. They eventually gave in and put an ordinary meter in place for this family. And
Mm.
so it shouldn't have to come to that, though. It shouldn't have to come to that. It's not
No.
right. These are energy suppliers. We're buying a service from them, and we're having to beg for our life, for our health, for our, and our
It is. I mean,
security.
it's totally outrageous. And one of the problems is, of course, that we have very short memories at the moment. It seems to me because mobile phones in themselves haven't been around very long. Wi-Fi hasn't been around very long. We can't say that we've got 50, 100 years of knowledge on what Wi-Fi does, radiation does to the body from a box in your house. We don't know if it's going to be safe, and they can tell us it's safe, but we've never had children grow up to say 30, 40, 50 with this amount of radiation in them. I mean, they can say it's safe, but they can't prove it, can they?
They can't prove it. And we actually have got over 50 years worth of research on this form of technology. There are thousands of research publications. You just need to look at the Bioinitiative report.
Right.
And that's a group of independent scientists and doctors who've taken it upon themselves to bring all this research together in desperation of trying to alert the public to how dangerous this is. So, there's thousands of research publications going right back 50 years. There is research available there, so they can't say that we don't know. And
No.
so I've made some of that available. I've mentioned the Bioinitiative report within my letter, and also mentioned the fact that even World Health classified this technology, the whole of the RF spectrum, as possibly causing cancer. And that was in 2011. And that was nearly the entire World Health Group of IARC who gave that classification. So they're installing these smart meters in our homes that are officially classified as possibly causing cancer, and we're expected to accept them. And they're not warning the public about the real dangers and risks that are associated with this technology, and especially for children. And I have some leaflets here. um, these are actual government. I don't know whether you can see them
Let's.
there.
Yeah. If you put. Yeah.
One on
Okay.
mobile
Mobile
phones, one
phones.
on base stations. this is actual government advice, which the public, I'm sure, are completely unaware of. And in this advice on mobile phones, it says here, the use of mobile phones for children under the age of 16 should be discouraged, and for non-essential calls. And it says, in light of the recommendations of the chief medical officers, they strongly advise that where children and young people do use phones, that they should be encouraged to use the phones for essential purposes only, keep the calls short, taking they don't want them to be prolonged to and discouraged from the exposure. So that's official guidance for all the under 16s. But what happens?
So they kind of, they cover their backs by having a leaflet printed saying, oh, yeah, this isn't very good for you. Use it only in rare circumstances. But everywhere else is promoting the use of these phones, and parents are willy-nilly giving them, because they're giving them to the kids because they feel that there's the demand, you have that sort of peer pressure, and also the worry that, well, if I give him a phone, if anything happens, he can ring me, and that we never used to do that.
Well, this is saying for essential calls only, keep the calls short for under 16s, but then they contradict themselves, because the children are going to school, and they're sitting in classrooms full of Wi-Fi, full of like iPads that they're expected to do the homework, which will be exceeding the radiation limits that they're concerned about here. And also, there's also concerns raised about the foam masts as well, from the original Sir William Stewart group, which it says that the precautionary approach should be followed, and that there were gaps in their knowledge. So there's concerns that are there, which I suppose they can pull this up in a court of law and say, well, we did warn you.
Yeah, we told you.
We told you. Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of pressure from the telephone masts companies to put them on places like schools. I've had anecdotal evidence that people have told me that they first refused to have a phone mast on a school, and then the money was upped, and they said, oh, well, we don't have much funding, so we'll take the money and sod the health of the kids. Well, you may not have any kids to educate if you go on like that.
Well, the laws have been relaxed as well, the planning laws, especially for 5G. And this is going to be a problem for everybody, because they're going to need 5G masts on virtually every street, because the radiation doesn't travel as far. So 5G will be working in combination with 4G, and it's going to increase the energy power as well. So it's not environmentally friendly. They try to say, oh, we're doing all this for net zero and for climate change and for the environment. It's not environmentally friendly. They haven't done any risk assessment. What about the wildlife? What about the birds, the bees, the insects? Our children, there's no risk assessment that's been done. They're putting this system up, and then there's nobody regulating it. Absolutely nobody regulating it. The industry are saying, as long as it's got an ICNIRP certificate, or the government are saying, as long as it's got an ICNIRP certificate, you can't consider the health, it should be considered safe. Well, ICNIRP, and in my letter of response to the government, I've said ICNIRP, because they're still using ICNIRP as a safety guideline. Their guidelines only protect your body from cooking, only based on mainly over a 6-minute period. Could you imagine you don't heat up within 6 minutes, so you're safe?
So when you say cooking on
microwave oven?
Oh, on a microwave oven, right?
So only based on heating effects. So if your body doesn't heat up after 6 minutes, it should be considered as safe. Well, that's ridiculous. I think a school child could tell you that that's ridiculous. How is anybody going to accept that as a form of safety? And there's many biological changes that's happened before then, and more people, some people are more sensitive than others as well. And then there's research that's showing that there are biological effects. So it's
and especially children who are going through huge changes in their biology at school age.
Yeah, ICNIRP even admit themselves that it's outside of the scope of the guidelines. whether, this technology will interfere with electrical implants such as pacemakers.
Right.
So, what if you've got a pacemaker, you're relying on that for your life, and then you're being forced to have a smart meter, you're being forced to have a 5G phone mast put right in front of your house, and you're being forced to have smart appliances. You're not being told about the risks associated with Wi-Fi or how to hardwire the system and, give the precautionary measures and the warnings being given out. They're not telling us any of that, and it's only people like us and charities and people who are desperately trying to get this message out to people that are sending out the words of warning. And thank God we've got some brilliant scientists and doctors, who are really trying to alert the world to this. And it's great that Robert Kennedy's group at Children's Health Defence have also taken this on, and Robert Kennedy's also raising concerns about 5G and, and concerns for children and the whole system. So
What was the response from the government when you sent your letter in that people have downloaded and sent to their MP? Did they come back to you?
yes, they've responded, and I actually had a response to the freedom of information questions as well, asking who is going to be held liable. Who's responsible
Yes.
for the liability, because there's going to be claims in the courts. I mean,
Right.
and really interesting to see their answer was they don't know. They haven't got that information.
They
So
don't know.
no, they don't know.
So, so there you are. You've had your smart meter put in. Something's happened to you. You go and you take them to court, and they have no idea who's liable.
They don't know. And I said, I thought you might have. I've responded. I'm waiting for them to respond now to my response.
Yes.
And I said, I thought you might have known who should be held responsible. In fact, it's a question that we at the Radiation Research Trust asked EDF Energy, those same set of questions, and we didn't receive a response. So therefore, we assume that they haven't got the liability cover if they can't respond or show us this information. So
Yeah.
surely, if the government are telling the industry and encouraging them to get smart meters in every new home, put smart meters in every home when a traditional meter needs replacing, surely they should know who's going to be responsible for any liability claims in the future in the courts, because there's already been 2 court cases, one recently in the UK on electrosensitivity. So, one of them involved a child. She was struggling in school with the Wi-Fi, couldn't attend school because it was making her so ill. And eventually the parents took the industry to the government to court and won. And so
And
there had
one.
to be special education plan put in place for this child, so she's not exposed to Wi-Fi. And so that, there's a case won.
So,
And
I mean, I don't understand this. If they do not have any public liability, there's no insurance against anybody who is ill. They've opened themselves up to millions of pounds worth of court cases, and
massive.
massive.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, you want people to be immediately
Yeah.
rushing to the courts, because somebody has to be liable and made accountable for this, and it's not good enough
I
to say,
think,
"Oh,
yeah,
we don't know."
not good enough. And I think it's going to be lucrative for the lawyers,
Yes.
because they don't know. In fact, even Swiss Re, one of the biggest reinsurance groups, has actually put 5G as one of their main concerns. They will not insure the industry, and they've said they've placed 5G as at the highest category risk. So,
Gosh.
they can't get insurance from the insurance industry. So who's going to pay? Is it going to end up falling on the taxpayer? Is it going to end up falling on our shoulders again? For the
Well, why
government's
should I mean?
mistakes.
Yeah, but why should the taxpayer pay for anything if the government haven't done their job?
They haven't done the job and they're
It's,
not listening. They
and
won't. Yeah.
they need, so instead of just getting the government liable, you need the minister who's passed, actually the person, the very, the living man rather than the corporation,
Yeah.
to be the to be the one who signed the document, who is taking that, whoever signs the thing has got to be responsible. You only need a couple of those cases and he's bankrupt.
Absolutely. Somebody's got to be held accountable now because, this is reckless, absolutely reckless. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost a lot of heartache. I believe completely with all the research and the concerns that are being raised by doctors and scientists that it's going to cause a lot of harm. And it's at the expense and also our privacy as well, the
Yes.
invasion on our privacy. They've got no right to invade the privacy of our homes. They haven't consulted us. They haven't asked if this is okay. I think people don't realize, the limit that this invasion is within their own homes, and especially when they get their smart appliances as well. They'll know when you've made a cup of tea. They'll know when you've been into your fridge. They'll, when you've got your cooker on. It's all transmitting this information to, the nearest mast from your smart meter, and who's given them that permission to know everything we're doing within our homes? And then you've got the risk of the cyber security attacks or an electromagnetic pulse,
Yes.
weather conditions could take them out. So it's a vulnerable system. Along with the fire hazards, going back to that family that I was telling you about that we helped earlier this year, they were actually going to install a smart meter under the stairs cupboard next to the gas meter. Does that make sense when they're known to be fire hazards?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you've got to have a smart meter, I mean, if you have, and I don't agree with it at all, but surely outside of the building, at least on the outside wall, where if it's necessary for a utility company to come and inspect it for any reason, but outside of the building rather than inside would at least be a start.
Well, even outside of the building, because in the USA, their meters are mostly outside of the building.
Right.
And there were thousands of reports of fires, of ill health effects, where it's affecting, where the meter outside of the building is affecting the vegetation as well, the plant life, everything. So, even outside of the building, if that goes on fire, it's still attached to your house.
Well, true. Yes. Yes.
So it's just, I think it's just a complete disaster. It really just needs rethinking.
You're right. With the liability thing, I mean, if that must be a loophole, surely that is worth poking, because if no one's taking responsibility for it, it can't happen, can it? They can't push somebody's got to be responsible. And if the liability isn't the government and it's not the utility company, it's certainly not the house owner, because they don't want it. It's been foisted on them.
Yeah.
Surely this is a loophole in which it can be fought, because if they can't get insurance for it, it surely cannot go ahead.
You'd have thought so. And that's why in this second letter now, I'm encouraging everybody to download it from our website. Use both letters, send them to your MPs. We've also got non-consent forms on our website as well.
I'm going to put up the website on the screen here. Just guide me to it, if you wouldn't mind, so that the viewers who are worried about this can send that to their MP.
If you go to the top of the page in the call to action section, you can see on the second line down, go to call to action.
Yeah.
And then scroll down, and then you'll see...
here we go. There's a picture of me. Complaint because they're dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you go a bit
higher.
Yeah. Oh no, that's it. The RRT response to net zero. That's the one. Yes.
That's the one.
That's the response. And within that response, you'll also, I asked the government and the Freedom of Information request, I asked if I could make their letters publicly available, and they agreed. So there's links within that letter to actually the government's response. So you'll be able to read it for yourself and
Oh
see.
yes, here we go.
Yeah, so if you scroll down, you'll actually be able to read the government's response. And then
Oh,
we've made a
brilliant.
whole load of demands in there, about the guidance
Yes,
and that traditional meters need to remain. Um, you know,
fantastic.
People need the right to opt out, and so I'm encouraging everybody to send this letter along with the first letter. There's a link to the first letter within this, but to send them both to
Right.
the government, to your MP. As like that family earlier this year, their MP was not aware of the right to opt out and ended up supporting his constituent. So maybe if all our MPs finally get to realise that, read these letters, the real sort of concerns and risks that we're raising within there, and before they go wasting any more money and putting people's health and
Which of
lives
course
at
we end
risk.
up paying.
Yes,
It
they
all
need to
comes out of.
stop. They need to stop and think again. And then maybe I was shocked when I saw the Freedom of Information response that they don't
Yes,
know.
they don't know. They don't know
Yeah,
who's liable. So so people can do that, and I'm sure. But my viewers, I have to say, are very actionable people. They will go and download that, and as you have found out from the first letter in which
yeah.
they've done that, which is absolutely brilliant. There was a question there that was just forming in my mind, which has just disappeared from the responses from the government. What? Oh yes. What is in the energy bill that has now passed? Curiously, had royal assent like that.
Yeah.
Is the opt-out still within that?
Um, I haven't seen. There's only a press release that I noticed because it only went through just
Right.
at the end of last week.
Yeah.
I've phoned the House of Parliament to speak directly with the Office of Energy Security and Net Zero, and they haven't got a phone number that you can reach.
Yeah.
Even the receptionist was surprised that there wasn't a
Oh
phone
right.
number to reach directly into their department. So I've left a message for my MP as well to say, what does this mean? I
Yeah.
assume that we still will have the right to opt out because in their letter directly from the Department of Security and Net Zero and Energy Security and Net Zero, you'll see in that letter of response to the Radiation Research Trust that they said that right will remain, and that right to opt out is going to still be in place. But then it's a bit of a contradiction because they say that it's okay to opt out, ask to opt out, but then it's going to be up to the industry. And they're encouraging the industry to install smart meters.
Yes, of
It's going to be
course.
up to the industry to decide whether or not the customer, they'll
Can
agree
opt
with
out.
trying to get a traditional meter for the customer. And that because of there being less and less traditional meters available, that it's really
Well,
mandated. Well, it's more or less a mandate anyway, because if you've
yeah.
got the right
I
to
mean, they
opt
can.
out, but there's nothing available,
Well, they can manufacture some more, surely. I
that's what they
mean,
need to do. And
they've
this,
manufactured them in the past. It's not like they've forgotten how to
yeah,
do it. What I don't understand there, I mean, again, this is another sort of weird and worrying thing with government that there's no phone line into the very department. These people are supposed to be our servants, after all. They are supposed to be working for us. They do seem to make things very difficult for people like yourself who are rightly concerned, or members of the public who wish to contact them. I mean, I can understand it with private utility companies who don't want to answer questions. They say, well, no, we won't have a phone line, just email in. But the government,
yeah,
I mean, it is a duty, surely, as a government to be open and transparent to the people who vote
absolutely.
for them and elect them and put them into power.
Especially when they're pushing a bill through from that very department that's going to
Well,
enforce, more or less. They're saying it's not enforceable because you can opt out, but then we haven't got any other option but a smart meter.
yes.
So, and then you can't get hold of them on the phone. You phone the Houses of Parliament and they haven't got a phone line to put you through to.
What
So,
I'd like to know is it a criminal offence to refuse these people to put one in? Is it a civil matter,
I would
which ends
say
up?
I would encourage people to contact the police, and I would assume that it is a civil matter,
Mm,
because it's your home, it's the invasion of your privacy. You've got the right.
yes,
There's rights as the Human Right Act. We've got rights within that, to protect
yes.
our privacy and our right to life, and those that should be respected. So if anybody comes under that threat, I would take them letters, go to the police station, and ask them for support.
I mean,
Um,
ultimately, I suppose if an electrical utility company who wanted to um, sew up the market and make lots of money, if they said our policy is not to provide smart meters, you can just use your old meter, or we'll put in a new meter if it's broken, and we won't force you to have that. If somebody, a utility company, was doing that, and everybody was able to do that and just switch, so the other ones, I'm going to switch over to this, we don't do smartmeters.com,
mm,
whoever they are. That would be it, wouldn't it?
I would have thought so. Would imagine it could be a very lucrative business for
Well,
somebody to
yeah,
you know to keep the traditional meters available. And I'm
absolutely.
sure they're going to be in demand, or they're going to have to put the fiber optic system in anyway. From what we know, from all the scientists and what the doctors are telling us, from the
Yes,
research that is available on this technology, there's reason for concern. And people who are, become ill. There's court cases now with that one of the child, and also a lady who was given early retirement as well, and on a full pension because she was unable to continue her work due to electrosensitivity. So that was another court case that was
yeah,
won in the UK last year. And so what's it going, there's court cases now that are won. And what's it going to take? How many more court cases? People who are severely ill with electrosensitivity. I know a few that are on the personal independent payment plan as well.
yeah,
So they can't work. It's just impossible for them to be able to be part of society. And when you meet somebody who is severely ill with electrosensitivity like that, it is heartbreaking. They're
yeah,
completely sort of like it's like creating a leprosy colony. You
yeah.
just go off and just, we don't care what happens to you. Go off and just suffer and find yourself somewhere to live. But so, people are living in isolated lives. I've had people in floods of tears on the phone. One lady who hasn't left her home for 8 years and is absolutely terrified at the thought of a smart meter coming into her home. And
and and and for the sake of those people who are skeptic and who say, oh no, it's no problem at all, whatever, that's fine. We're not saying if you want a smart meter then you shouldn't have one. That's not the argument at all. But it's having choice. And if a lot of people or just one individual says, do you know what, I would rather not have one. Thank you so much for the kind offer to have a radiating box in my room that might cause me health, but I'd rather not have it. They ought to have that choice to be able to say, and that right to say, no, thank you. And that's all
absolutely.
you're asking, isn't it?
They should be allowed that choice, but also the unsuspecting public who
Mm.
are embracing the technology and allowing it to come into their homes, without realizing what the risks are and the privacy
Yes.
invasion. They're not being told, so they're not being informed of anything. So it's uninformed consent, and
Yeah.
that's not right. The
Well,
needs.
that's not proper consent
No,
anyway.
it's not.
If you're not informed of
Not
of the
informed.
dangers, then your contract effectively is null and void anyway, because you've not been told everything about that device, which again potentially could cause problems in court.
You don't want to wait until you become
Well,
ill.
no,
And
absolutely.
that's how I got into this campaign over 20 years ago. I was living next to a phone mast, 100 meters from a phone mast, and it was one of the first that was put in the network in the early 90s. And 7 years after living 100 meters from that phone mast, I got breast cancer. And And then I found a huge cancer cluster in our village around the mast and did a health survey. And the health conditions people were suffering with, all the problems we're seeing with electrosensitivity, with the sleep problems, the headaches, the nausea, skin rashes. There was people with precancer cervical cells, fertility problems. One of our neighbours died of motor neuron disease. We even had a horse that had blood problems, and that's how this campaign got started. So I know what it's like and and how it feels to be in
Yeah.
that position and absolutely desperate to protect your health and to protect the health of your children. And at that time in 2001, there wasn't anything available. Now all the research is there on our websites. It's easy for people to go and read it themselves. But we were on the phone to professors and desperately seeking help and ordering the shielding material to make radiation nets to go over the beds. My son was suffering with horrific nosebleeds, and that I was being told that he would have to have his nose cauterized. My daughter was having hallucinations. We're having this in night terror hallucinations.
Oh,
As soon as these radiation protective nets went over the beds, it stopped. And my children were only young at the time. They didn't realize. They thought it was, like a mosquito net that you get on
yes.
holiday. So they
Yeah.
didn't know what it was doing. And it was the first time I was able to get a proper good night's sleep. And because my blood was being monitored, and the same with other people in the village, we were suffering with low white blood cells. And because my blood was being monitored, going through all the chemo treatments, I was able to, when I was able to get away from the mast, my blood would recover quickly. So, once you're
That's
away from
amazing.
it, you recover.
Yeah.
And
Well,
but when put back in it and you're ill again.
we turn the whole electric off in my house at night time. Everything's switched off
Yeah,
overnight from when we go to bed.
that's
Um,
sensible if you can do it.
and the freezer doesn't defrost in the 8 hours or whatever, but at least we sleep very well now. And
Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't say I was sensitive to the stuff. I don't know, but I don't know what the long term effect is going to be because it's invisible and it's silent.
yes,
And that's what people obviously don't realize. And they think, well, you can't see. It's not. There's no smoke. There's no sort of weird lights coming at you, and it's that long-term effect, as you've so
it
well
is. Well,
illustrated.
since then I've traveled everywhere. I've visited doctors, scientists in countries all over the world, and attended conferences, organized conferences. I even went and stayed with the head of Russia's radiation protection, because in Russia they're more advanced and know more about this technology than most other countries in the world.
Mm,
And they were desperately trying to warn the Western world, about the dangers associated with this. And the head of Russia's radiation protection, he died a few years ago, but he was an amazing scientist. He also helped in the capping of dealing with the Chernobyl accident. So he dealt with non-ionizing radiation and ionizing radiation, and with space radiation as well. And he said, I asked him, Professor Yuri Grigorev, remember that name and look him up. I asked him, what is worse, ionizing radiation or non-ionizing radiation? Well, we all know that ionizing radiation is under control, and this was his answer. He said non-ionizing radiation is worse because it is out of control. And he
right.
said, with ionizing radiation, you've got X-rays and everything. Now we know we've got to control it. You've got to be careful. He said, with this, it's everywhere. He said, man conquered the Black Plague, and he created another one, which is EMF pollution. Now
Yeah.
that's terrifying. He was warning desperately for especially for our children, and really concerned for the health of our children. I organised a conference many years ago at the Royal Society in London and brought both sides of the debate together, from the highest level in the world, and that included Yuri Grigorev. And even the head of our health protection agency, Sir William Stewart, presented at that as well. And we had both sides. I thought if I can get these scientists from both sides of the debate together, it'd never been done before, and to debate this over a 2-day session, that will be it, and it was really, the industry funded scientists, government scientists, they had nothing to offer from what I could see compared to the independent scientists and doctors who were raising concerns. And then I was naive at the time, thinking, well, if I alert the government and go, I was in and out of Parliament, I was in and out of the UK Parliament, the EU Parliament, and within discussion groups at the EU Commission and with the Health Protection Agency in the UK. And I really thought that if they got to know what the real concerns were, and even Sir William Stewart, who was in charge of the UK Health Protection Agency, he raised concerns. And if the man in charge was raising concerns and they still didn't listen, God help us. But I naively thought the politicians would do something. They held debates, they raised questions, but nothing happened. And I now realize that the power is in the hands of the public. It's the grassroots level. That's where it's at. And what you're doing, Richard, it's so important because you can reach so many people. And I'm so grateful to you for being able to do that, because we need the public to be able to get onto their MPs and tell them this is not good enough, and start taking control ourselves. We can start in our own homes, start to protect your children. People will know now. There's a government warning there that they're not being told about for the under 16s. So you start taking measures in your own home, hardwire your computers. It's an easy thing to do. If you can't switch off your Wi-Fi, put your phones in flight mode. And there's the special connections you can even use for your phones to be put into the hardwire Ethernet system, and you can switch in flight mode, get rid of the radiation, and still use all the applications for, WhatsApp and the internet. So you can use the technology safer. Don't have a smart meter. Insist that that's not acceptable, and fight. If you've got a phone mast application coming anywhere your home, fight it with everything you've got, and don't allow it to happen. Get in touch with all your neighbours, all your friends, all your family. Get everybody to object against it, because those objections work. We had a phone mast that was withdrawn just a few days ago from a complaint that we made. That I sent a letter of complaint against a phone mast in Southport, and within a week it's been withdrawn, raising the fire hazard issues, safety issues, and also the fact that there's a document within that letter. You'll find it on the call to action section again. There's a document in that letter that's really important, that's been written by a barrister. And this barrister has actually put details together to let the councillors know and the planning officials know that they could be held personally liable and responsible for the decisions they make. So if they make a decision to allow the phone mast right next to your house, and they sit on committees that are supposed to protect public health, that goes against their duty of care. They could actually even lose their own homes, according to this document written by this barrister. And so it's, they really need to pay attention to it, because I don't think they realize that, I'm not saying this out of trying to frighten them.
No,
it's out of trying to warn them that they need to be careful.
Yeah. It's so important that you get a name, a real, rather than just the council, because that's just, it's an abstract concept, whereas an actual person who is signing off anything, they're the ones who are responsible. And if they know that there is a chance of £1 million court case coming up against them, they might think twice about agreeing to these things.
Absolutely. And the same happened with our phone mast when we had when we discovered the cancer cluster where we lived, and we engaged with solicitors at the time. We spent thousands trying to get advice from the solicitors who were based in Birmingham then. And the solicitors actually came back with advice saying we should put the industry on notice. And they said it was so important to draw their attention to the fact that Since the foam mast had been there, this was the list of people who'd become ill. And up until that point, that area where we lived had been classed as one of the healthiest areas in the Midlands. And that was we got that information back from the environmental health. We had all the environmental health officers and public health officers and visiting. And so up until that point, we were one of the healthiest areas. And so this lawyer advised us to put them on notice, let them know how many people had become ill, and that if they continued to operate this mast, they would be held accountable in a court of law, and listed the research that was available to date. There's even a lot more since then. I mean, the scientists now are saying there's that much information, really powerful reports that have been released since one is the NTP study and the Ramazzini study since the World Health Classification. And these scientists are saying it should be moved up a category to it is causing cancer. So if they're putting stuff in our homes that scientists are saying this should go to class 1, it is a carcinogen. That's not acceptable. It really is not. No, and how are our politicians ever going to recover from this? How are they ever going to, people are really reeling after the last 3 years. How are they ever going to recover if this continues? I don't think they will.
No, you're absolutely right. Well, I hope that you'll keep us posted. I'll find out from you if you get a response to the response that you've put in.
They've promised a response to the response, so I will let you know when I receive it.
Absolutely, that would be great. Yeah. And of course, if more people can put pressure on their MPs, even write to the Prime Minister's office as well, everything you can to the local papers, if you still have one, such a thing, and to your own council as well, to keeping everybody, all these people who are making these decisions, and absolutely stress the point that these people will be personally liable. And I think that's where you get them.
And start with your own home. Start with just protection in your own home. Once you've done that, then take it to the schools. Let the schools know that it's not right for them to be exposing their children in classrooms full of Wi-Fi. There's already a child now that's being given a special educational plan. There's one other child who actually committed suicide because she was not being listened to, and she was so ill because of the Wi-Fi she hung herself. Now, why hasn't things stopped now? It should never happen. And so we've got a child now who's on a special education plan. That now applies to anyone who believes their child is coming home from school, they're suffering with headaches, look for the signs. The addiction that children have got to these phones as well. That's just, the life that they're living now compared to the lives we lived when we were kids. They're just glued to the technology. And so the social skills, what's happening there?
Well, all of that is...
They talk about the digital divide, but that's divided us more than anything. We need to get back to face-to-face communication, and our children need to be getting out there, like we did, and have some fun, real fun,
real fun in the real world. Eileen, thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about it. More power to you. I will leave the link of the website and the link to those documents in the description, so viewers can go immediately there and have an exploration and send those letters off, download them, send them to your MP. Thank you so much. Brilliant advice there, ladies and gentlemen. Do protect yourselves. Take it very seriously. It is a very worrying development, and of course there's more of it coming into the streets around our houses that we have less ability to protect, but we can and we must protect our homes and those environments. Eileen, thank you so much.
Talk
to you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be back with more monologues and, of course, more wonderful interviews. But in the meantime, from Eileen and myself, thank you for watching and goodbye.